The 2024 presidential election is different than most. In the last 248 years, it's only the fourth election to happen during a Uranus return, if you include 1776's American Revolution and the election of George Washington. What's a Uranus return, you ask? A Uranus return, and any kind of return in astrology, is when a planet appears to return back to where it was when you were born. So every time the sun returns to where it was when you were born in a chart, that's a solar return or a birthday. So everyone's used to counting that. A lunar return happens every month. Ask any woman about that and she'll tell you about that. For a country, Uranus tends to be a rebellious, kind of freedom-oriented warring cycle. So we're going to cover that in a minute. But any planet can return to where it was when you were born. And when it does, something predictable usually happens. So speaking of 84-year cycles, back in the first term when Trump was president, there was a book called The Fourth Turning that came out, and I think it's still on the New York Times bestseller list. But I heard Steve Bannon talking about it, and he doesn't use astrology. He was using historical cycles where the U.S. every 84 years and divisions of that, basically the country's recycling itself, going through war, all this kind of stuff. And it was interesting what he said, because 84 years is a Uranus cycle. So what I did, I thought, let's compare this book to the Uranus cycle and see what's going on. Steve Bannon is actually very sharp with historical things, and I know he's got something up his sleeve. But anyways, let's see if we're in sync with this Uranus cycle and the fourth turning. Here's a brief synopsis of the Fourth Turning book. What it states, basically, you can read it all the way through if you want, but the short version is every 85 years in the history of countries, especially American history, there is a crisis that occurs, and during this time, everything gets reset, and there's a kind of a tumultuous political environment that ripens for another crisis. So it's a repeating cycle of crisis. And I don't know if you've noticed it, but when the last election cycle started back in 2016, I knew we were nearing a Uranus return, and I told my wife there's going to be a weird civil war vibe for the next 10, 12 years. And sure enough, as soon as Trump started running, it got all divided, got all weird. And even today, they're still talking about civil war, and it's a mess. But this cycle is definitely in effect, and we're going to take a closer look at that in the next few slides. So here's one of the charts from the Fourth Turning book, and I've highlighted the last 4 Uranus cycles. So you see when the United States formed back in 1776, we'll count that as the birthday and the first Uranus return, even though it's the birth date. They have other ones, but I'm just going to start there, and they all line up. Civil War, 84 years after 1776, you get 1861, Civil War. 84 years after that, you get 1945, or World War II, and that was the Hitler era. Again, it's a Civil War vibe. 84 years after that, that's our next one coming up, and that's 2028. So until the 2028 comes around, you could tell this vibe right now, it's percolating, and we're going to take a closer look at that. Okay, so here's the birth date of the United States of America, July 4th, 1776, and here's Uranus. I'm going to cycle through 10 years at a time, and you can see every time it returns, something amazing happens. So we're including the first July 4th, 1776 as one of the returns because we were fighting against England for our freedom, so that's already a war. So here goes Uranus. Ready? So here we go. So there's 80, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're at 1860 or 1861. That's going to be the Civil War, 1861. So I'm going to go back and go 84 more years. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. And here you see Uranus is returning back to where it was again. So this is 1944, 1945. That's World War II. That's Hitler. So if we add 84 more to this, this is going to take us to an interesting period. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then here we're at the year 2014, 2016. And this was the last election cycle. And I knew it was coming up on our return. And I told my wife there's going to be a weird vibe with this whole Civil War kind of war thing. And back then, this was before the whole division started with all the craziness going on. But if you look here, you see Uranus is getting closer. So that's 2021, 2022, 23. So that's this year's election. And Uranus still hasn't returned. But what's interesting, look what it's going to do. It's going to go over here. We're going to talk about Algol in a minute, which is this cardinal nature kind of Medusa head thing, the snake head. But this next election, we're going to have Uranus right on top of Algol. So there's going to be a real carnal nature, low vibe sentiment going out through the U.S. And not only that, but then for the next, let's look, 4 or 5, until 2028. That's our next Uranus return, 2028, 2029. And a lot of cycles are going to wind up in 2028, 2029. So this next election is going to have a very carnal vibe, very low vibration, and it's not going to end yet. Not until 2028. We're going to keep picking up steam towards this whole war vibe. So it's coming on. In the last slide, we talked about Algol. Fixed stars also work in astrology. They serve a different purpose. Algol is known as Medusa's head. You can see all the snakes in her head over here. Actually, let me highlight that. So you see all these snakes in her head. If you look at all the pyramids, you look at all the different things, wherever there's snakes built into something, it's a reminder that when you let your carnal, lower snake nature rule your world will come to an end. So Algol, as Uranus hits that right around election time, there's going to be a very low vibration, kind of snaky, kind of just carnal, really depressing feeling coming on. It's not going to be like a nice election. It's going to be something, kind of filthy, kind of low vibration, and that's coming up. But anyways, I mentioned Algol, so I wanted to talk about this fixed star a little bit. Medusa's head, it involves a snake in your thinking. All right, so that's the basic idea. This is just a quick recap of the election coming up. So we talked about Algol and Uranus, and right here you can see Uranus stations right on top of Algol, right around, let's say, October, November, December of this year of 2024, right during the election time. So from the election all the way to the inauguration, whether Trump wins or loses, there's going to be a very kind of just low vibrational, kind of snake, carnal nature thing going on. So it's not going to be a pretty election. Okay, the first contender here in the election, Donald Trump. Luckily, his birth certificate is published on the internet, and that's because of a lawsuit he filed against, of course, a lawsuit he filed against Bill Maher, because when he started his birtherism thing saying Obama wasn't American, Bill Maher said he would pay $1 million if he would produce his birth certificate to prove that his dad wasn't an orangutan because he's orange, right? So, of course, Trump produced it, and I don't know if Bill Maher paid him or not, but the good thing was he ended up publishing his birth certificate online. So we do have it, and I've checked it, and it's a valid date. So we're going to use this to look at Donald Trump cycles for the election coming up, and we'll see what we learn from that. So we'll take a look at Trump's personality, then we'll look at the directions, zodiac stuff, everything else. But for now, the personality is interesting. So Trump actually is very charismatic, and we'll take a look at his chart. So we're going to go really quickly through it. So here's a planetary position, sun sign, Gemini. Okay, so he's a good communicator. This one's not that important, Sun 30 Venus, not that important. This one, a little bit important, Sun 45 Pluto, egotistical person, overbearing, controlling, turbulent relationships. Okay, so I'll buy that. The moon, I didn't put an exact time chart for this one, so we'll skip the moon. Mercury square Neptune. This one's interesting. Mercury's thinking. Neptune is kind of dreamy, fantasy, that kind of stuff. So unreliability, obstacles, misfortune. The memory is apt to be poor, mind vacillating, somewhat unpractical. Periods of mental aberration. If you ever hear him do speeches, he's charismatic, but sometimes he goes off on a tangent where you're just like, the heck's going on with this guy? Mars 30 Pluto, and we'll skip that one. Mercury Pluto. Venus 30 Mars, not that powerful. This is a good one. Venus conjunct Saturn. So Venus is money, Saturn's control. So desire to have control over money and personal relationships. So yeah, we'll buy that one. Jupiter trine Uranus, this helps him a lot. Jupiter is really a beneficial. Uranus is the public in this sense. So super fame, talented at dealing with the public and audiences. Great natural ability in areas ruled by Uranus. In the public, politics, he kicks butt. He's very charismatic. Entertainment industry, people are drawn to him. So that's obvious at this point. Jupiter Chiron, another good one. Chiron's charisma. And Jupiter's super beneficial. So this one's going to be fabulous public image, commanding presence, and that's the charisma we were talking about. So he instills confidence and wins trust. All right, so that's actually super good for a politician. Uranus Chiron trine, again, charisma in the public. So very powerful and helpful. It occurs rarely, but he's got it. Okay, Sun Venus, we talked about that. The public loves him. Sun Uranus, public. So he's got charisma to spare. Sun, Pluto, tremendous willpower. Yep. All this stuff. We already talked about it. Loved by the public. Sex symbol, Venus, Pluto, right? Sexuality, power from beauty. Okay. Jupiter, Chiron. Again, public trust, charisma. And then Uranus, Pluto, power and control over the public. So his personality sounds on point. A quick recap of Trump's natal chart has a couple of interesting things that we're going to talk about. One thing is he has Mars on his ascendant. And whenever people have a strong Mars on their ascendant or aspecting the ascendant or the first house ruler, any of that stuff, they become what's known as gingers or redheads. So Trump is a red person. He has Mars there. He's aggressive. The other thing that's interesting on his midheaven, which is your status in life, he has that right on Algol. So Trump, if you notice what he's famous for, it's all the Algol or snake or low vibration traits. So lying, cheating, stealing, wrathful, everything you can think of that's, I guess, biblical for the snake or the serpent or the devil, whatever you want to call it, the low vibration thinking. That's kind of Trump's hallmark. So midheaven on Algol, and then Mars on the ascendant. And a little bit later, we'll talk about when he turned orange, because that's something that I thought it was interesting. I was looking through his chart, and you see it there, and you're like, oh, that's when it was. But it was 2006. We'll cover that in a minute. And the other thing that's weird to me is I'm a Christian, and when he started running for office saying he was a Christian, our whole church right away gravitated towards him, even though it was all snake vibrational stuff. His thing was like racism. His thing was basically everyone's a liar, calling everyone, it's just really low vibrational stuff. And I never thought the church would turn immediately to jump on his bandwagon. That caught me off guard. So I'm still recovering from that. But anyways, we're going to look at Algol more in a minute. Mars. And also this is interesting too. His second house, which is money, is ruled by Mercury, the Lord of Virgo. So that factors in the elections too. But let's move on and take a look at what's coming up for the next election with Donald Trump. As a Christian, the 2016 election was very educational for me. I always thought the church was about, being like Jesus and loving your neighbor and all that stuff. But what was weird, what I noticed was the more Trump talked about racist things, the more excited everyone at church got. And where we went to church, it was mainly white people, but we loved them all. We still do. But it was weird. They put all the little brown babies in cages at the border. Bumper stickers went up everywhere at church. T-shirts, Trump this, Trump that, and we couldn't figure it out. I was thinking it was the wrong kingdom. Our kingdom was the kingdom of, heaven and within and all that stuff. But it got weird. And what was weird too is it was brown babies. Like there was no blonde visa overstay babies with blue eyes, in cages. None of that stuff. It was only brown babies at the border, and everybody went crazy for Trump. So I thought I'd read a verse from the scriptures just to remind my, Christian brothers and sisters. This is the snake thinking that we're talking about, Algol, or however, God describes it throughout the different scriptures and mythologies. This is from Galatians chapter 5, verse 19. When you follow the desires of your sinful nature, the results are very clear. Sexual immorality, impurity, lustful pleasures, idolatry, sorcery, hostility, quarreling, jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish ambition, dissension, division, envy, drunkenness, wild parties, and other sins like these. Let me tell you again, as I have before, that anyone living that sort of life will not inherit the kingdom of God. So that type of verse doesn't apply to Trump. Everyone at church, as long as he's, doing all those things, they love him even more. So go figure. It's not Christian, but it is what it is. If you want to learn more about Algol and what the snake means in the Bible, we have another video on our channel called "A Snake in the Wilderness." You should check that out. All right, so let's look at Trump's directions and different things he got going on astrologically from 2016 to 2029, the fourth turning Uranus cycle we've been talking about. So important houses for this is going to be the second house, money, which when people win presidencies, they usually make a bunch of money. So that's going to be Virgo or Mercury for Trump. Eighth house, because that can slow people down, that's death. So, of course, that can slow people down, Pisces, or for Trump, Jupiter. And then the 10th house is Venus. So that's career. So let's take a look at his directions now and see what we have showing up there. All right, so this is Trump's, primary motion chart, or directions as they're called in astrology. So the planets we were interested in is Mercury, right? And then Jupiter, and then Venus. So let's start with Mercury right here. You can see it. I'm going to go down 10 years at a time. And whenever these planets cross angles, that's when They work great for astrology. These things right here are good for big cycles, right? The primary directions. Not so much for drilling down day to day, but if you see Mercury here, okay, we're looking at about the year 1997. When Mercury, which is money in his chart, hits the ascendant, that's going to be right here. And that's right around the year 2016, right? 2015, 2016. So that election in 2016, when Trump got elected, he made a lot of money. Okay, the other thing to notice there, let's look at a few more things. Jupiter is interesting. So that's going to be his 8th house or death. So if you look when this comes up, I thought this normally could kill somebody right here. But in his case, something interesting happened when Jupiter hit his ascendant with Mars, right? That's his orange, red kind of, Martian thing, ginger thing. So that's 2006. When this happened right here, this is when he actually turned orange. If you look at all the different pictures of him on the internet, he's always just normal looking, kind of whitish, normal looking, whitish. Then after 2006, that's when he started with his makeup. And what happened here, this aspect was the one that activated this Mars, but in a bad way. And he's very conscious of how he looks, and this really took him to town right there. So that's when he became orange. So I thought that was interesting when I was looking through this. Then the other thing is career. Right here is Venus, and that hit his midheaven, or it hits his midheaven right here. It looks like in 2014 or right around 2016. So that's why he won that election. So he got rich, yeah, and all that stuff. Then 2024 is the next one coming up. And what's interesting about that one is that's going to be Pluto. And Pluto is very powerful. That's, that's usually overkill or just overpowering someone. So this election is not going to be about money. This one's going to be about power. So if you see Pluto up here on the rise, so this is the year 2025, and then it peaks for him. Whoops. Oh, shoot, I went too far. It peaks right here at around 2029. And then also, if we look at Mars, that's the other planet on his angle. That's another one that's going to be important. If we go back in time, you see Mars coming down. And the year right here is around 1966. Okay, coming back down, Mars right here. You see it coming down towards the mid-Hades. We're at age 50, 60, 70, so that's 2016. So I'm going to go 1 year at a time right here. And you see Mars, it hits the mid-Hades and completes that cycle right around the year 2029. So that's Pluto and Mars. And on Trump's chart, they complete in 2029. And also the United States Uranus cycle and the 4th turning cycle ends in 2028, 2029. So a lot of important cycles end on the same year. So this next election in 2024, it's not going to lose steam until 2029. Okay, here's the next presidential candidate for 2024, Joe Biden. Problem with Joe Biden, there's no exact birth certificate for him online, so we had to figure out his birth time using rectification, which is not a big deal. We figured it out. So let's take a look at his birth chart. If you look online for Joe Biden's birth time, there's a couple of different quotes. One person said they quoted him at 8:30 a.m., and I think he quoted himself right around 8:30 a.m. So on Harmonic Life, my website, you can do rectifications. If you put in known events that happen in people's life, it'll figure out when they were born. So let's take a look. So this is the second clue we have from his birth time. The first one they said around 8:30 a.m. And this one just says from the newspaper in his local town. A son was born this morning in St. Mary's Hospital to Mr. and Mrs. Joseph R. Biden of Baltimore, Maryland. So we know it's in the morning, probably around 8:30. Now we'll go ahead and do his rectification. These are some of the events that I used for Joe Biden's rectification. You see here, I actually used a whole bunch because when people are presidential, they have tons of information on Wikipedia. There's some exact birth time things like when his kids were born, right when Hunter was born. We have when his wife and his daughter died. That was the exact time of that was in the newspaper, so that's an exact timed event. When he got sworn in presidentially, that was on the news, so I saw a recording of that, so that has the exact time. Then the other events aren't exact timed, but you can still use them, right? So I went ahead and generated his rectification, and we'll find out he was born right around 8:34 in the morning. I'll show you right here. So here's the divine double tap rectification for Joe Biden. I put on all those events, and this thing generates all the times where he could have possibly been born. And there's certain laws that are built into astrology where it follows rules, and it just doesn't, because you know those rules, you can pinpoint when certain things are going to happen or when they could have happened. So here you see right at 8:34 a.m., he definitely has a divine, I call it a divine double tap, and that's in the UTC time zone. So we're going to use that for his birth time. And we'll take a look at his chart for 2016, or I guess 2020, or 2016 till about 2029, the last Uranus return or fourth turn. All right, let's take a look at Joe Biden's personality. All right, here's his chart. Let's scroll down here and take a look. He has a Venus-Sun conjunction. Okay, a few other things here. Let's go down. So Scorpio. So that's just a sun sign. So critical, suspicious, skeptical. Okay, on the cusp of Sagittarius. So bright, jovial, and Scorpio. So interesting mix. Sun 150 moon. I didn't put a time chart. Let's skip the moon. So Sun conjunct Venus, person of beauty or charm, someone, comedian. Okay, probably good sense of humor. He's just getting older now. Sun trine Jupiter. So good at education, law, publishing. I think he is a lawyer, actually. So Jupiter's usually wisdom and law and things like that. Sun is divinity. So yeah, good at the law, skilled planner, patient. Sun square Chiron. Chiron's charisma, stuff like that. So he's got some issues with charisma. Let's see here. Venus trine Jupiter. So Venus is money or sense of humor, things like that. Jupiter is kind of divine, wise, things like that. So born leader, champion of sports, love of God. So that's good. Again, with law, publishing, knowledge. So it's got wisdom, got law. Venus Chiron square. So that's challenging aspect. So instead of being charismatic, he has two times he has issues with being charismatic. He's a family guy, marriage guy, but there's issues with his charisma. Okay, unlike Trump, who's like 100% charismatic. So that's not good for Joe Biden. His main qualification, I think, when he got elected in 2020 was that he wasn't Trump. You know what I mean? People were scared of Trump, so he wasn't Trump, but he didn't do anything, I think, that convinced people that he was awesome. He just wasn't Trump. Okay, Mars 150 Saturn. Control of war, pacifist. Okay, Jupiter 45 Saturn, not super strong. Losses through litigation, unfortunate aspect for business, different things. So, okay, that's not super strong. Sun, Pluto. So able to overhaul a system drastically. Okay, 60 degrees, not super strong. Uranus trine Neptune, able to present talent to the world. Okay, so he has a little bit of charismatic stuff going on, but not as much as Trump. Neptune 30 Chiron, that's not strong at all. Sun Venus again. So his main kind of repeating theme is a person of beauty or charm. So he's charming. Good sense of humor, I guess, right there, because that shows up twice, right? But not a ton of charisma. So he's funny, but he's not charismatic. Sun opposite Saturn. Derangement of health. Yeah, he had a few derangements of health, especially in 1988 with his aneurysm. Sun opposite Uranus. This one's going to be, it says, let's see, Uranus is the public, Sun is opposite that. So issues again with the public, not charismatic. I don't think he ever cheated on his wife. I know his wife died when he first got married in a car crash. So problems unexpected with marriage, relationship, okay. Venus opposite Saturn, again, disappointment, trouble in courtship and marriage. I think his problems came from, not that he cheated, not that he did anything bad, it's that his wife died. You know, and he had a major problem with that, and he lost 2 kids when he was young. So that's pretty horrific. So that was that one. That's, I think, also why Hunter Biden has so many issues. He was a little kid. I think he was like 5 years old, and his mom and his sister died right in front of him in a car crash. So he's got issues now, but that's why. That'll mess up anybody. Jupiter Uranus, that's a good one right there. Super fame, talented at dealing with the public. So he has some charisma, not as much as Trump, but he does have some charisma. And that's it for Joe Biden's personality. Now that we have Joe Biden's birth time, we can do the same thing we did for Trump's chart and take a look at his houses, which is very important. So for president, second house, money, it's going to be Capricorn or Saturn. 8th house, death, it's going to be Cancer or the moon. And then the 10th house is career, so that's Virgo or Mercury. So let's take a look at his directions and see what we can learn. So Saturn is over here. It is right here. So let's take a look at that one first. So when does Saturn go angular? And it looks like, here it is right here by my mouse. Looks like right around the year 2021. So 2020 is close enough. So he made a lot of money when he became president last time. Okay, another interesting thing here is you see the lunar nodes on the ascendant and descendant axis. When those cross over here, that usually signifies a significant change in someone's life. So that's going to be around the year 2023, 2024, a major change in life. So if you're president, you don't want a major change in life. You want a steady state. But the problem is with his age, and then Trump is, very charismatic, and people are making fun of Biden now because of his mental state. It's not looking good. Saturn already left the mid-Hades, so that aspect's gone. And then the other one I noticed too that happens is Neptune. Neptune is usually like hospitalization, pharmaceuticals, medicines, things like that. And when that hits his ascendant, which means medicine for the physical body, that's going to happen, if you notice down here, age 70, 2012, not quite. Okay. Age 80, right here, and that's going to be 2022. But look when that hits. It's like almost exactly 2024. And that's what's happening right now. Everyone's saying it's elder abuse for him to run. He has dementia. And, running against Trump, that's bad because Trump's going to pick up on that too. And it's true. He shouldn't be running. So, I don't know. It's kind of selfish that he's running, or the Democratic Party, whoever's telling him to run him. But, yeah, they need someone else, and they're going to lose. It's not good. One thing that comes up a lot with Joe Biden is that he has problems with his brain or dementia or, different things like that. So what I did, I took a look in 1988. He actually had an aneurysm where he collapsed on the floor in the White House, I think, or wherever he was at the time. And that does show up on his chart. And then later, starting from now probably until 2039, he has Algol approaching his ascendant by direction. So he does have some issues with his brain. He's been through a lot, but still, if you're going to be president, you got to have a sharp brain. So let's take a look at 1988 and Joe Biden's aneurysms. I've zoomed in this time to the chart to capture the 6th house, sickness. Also, he has Algol there. That's why when he gets sick, usually it's with his brain. And Pholus is a asteroid, but in mythology, it's a centaur that tries to heal someone and accidentally poisons himself. So it has to do with where medical stuff kind of goes wrong. So we'll take a look. Right now we're looking at April 87, and we know from the last picture it's a early 88. He had a couple of operations in 88, and they put a stint in his brain. So we'll take a look at Pholus when it hits Algol. Algol is always head injuries. Okay, so here we go. So I'm going to go a week at a time. So you see here Pholus is on the move. We're at June 87. It goes over Algol. So probably right there he started to have some maybe, issues with his brain. And Pholus is going to go retrograde in a minute. See, it turns red right there. It starts coming back towards Algol. I'm pointing at it with the mouse. So right there, this is like around Christmas 87. So I'm sure by now he's having problems with his head, and maybe he's not complaining yet, but he's feeling something. And then here, Pholus stations right on Algol. So this is February 88, and I think it said March in the last screenshot that we saw. And right there, see Pholus just stations, and that's where he has his aneurysm, and he collapses on his floor and all that stuff. Then Pholus sort of just, goes back and forth. But then we have Jupiter coming up, which usually is a good planet. But in his chart, he's already having problems. And Jupiter's going to station and come back. So he's having all kinds of problems in these years. So this is one of the reasons I think that he has problems with his brain. It goes back to he has a stint in his brain, plus he's older now. Then he has an Algol hit coming up by direction. So physically, he's having problems with his brain, and competing with someone like Trump, it's not going to help him. So here's a quick synopsis of Joe Biden's direction, starting from 2016. In 2020, we know Saturn rules his second house money. He got elected, so he probably made a lot of money. 2022, Vesta home on the ascendant. Okay, so that's not too big of a deal. 2022, Juno midheaven. That's not really too political, but it's not bad. 2023, 2024's nodes are going to hit the ascendant, descendant axis, so there's a major change, which if you're currently president, a major change means you're probably not going to be president. Also, speaking of his medical things, in 2024, Neptune hits his ascendant. Neptune's usually medical things, drugs, could be artistic things too. But for him, especially having brain conditions, Neptune on the ascendant, major change, that's not good. It means it's probably going to be like a medical problem for him to not get elected. It's going to be a problem. Also, he has Algol coming up to his ascendant. I didn't show you that, but I looked at it. Starting since 2016, it's getting closer, closer, and closer, and closer. So he's going to have more and more problems with his brain, and he already is if you saw the last debate. But at 2039, it actually hits the ascendant, so he's going to have a pretty severe medical issue, most likely, at that time. But these directional hits don't look great for getting reelected. All right, so let's take a look at Joe Biden's zodiac chart. One thing that I noticed that doesn't bode well for him, this is the year 2017. Let me back up a little bit. Okay, there's 2016. So the second house, typically when people become presidents, they make a lot of money. Okay, you saw that with Trump. You saw that with Biden by direction. So this is the zodiac chart. This is more for drilling down into the day-to-day activities. So if you notice, here's Saturn right down here by my mouse pointer. So this is 2016. So he got elected in 2020. But if you notice, Saturn enters his second house, which is money, which it rules, Capricorn. And that was right around, let's say, 2017, 2018. Okay, then we go here, year at a time. Okay, there's Saturn. So the 2020 election, which he won, Saturn was still in the second house. Then he also had that other hit by direction. So he was rigged to make money, and he beat Trump. Plus, Trump had everyone scared because he was doing all this crazy stuff. That was good back then. But Saturn leaves Joe Biden's second house in 2021. Okay, so after that, he's not doing so great with the money, not as good as he was. And in 2024, which is the next election, it's gone already. So that does not bode well for a re-election.
2024 election and oligarchy, Algol, and Uranus. Per the Uranus cycle and the fourth turning book, the USA is on the verge of oligarchy and fascism. It's not just the stars, it's history too. Who's in charge right now in America? Rich, powerful people, not the working class. The elites are. We're not really even democratic anymore. We only vote for who we're given as choices by the elite. Non-corporate owned candidates are silenced and kneecapped, i.e., no Bernies, no Mariannes. Only corporate owned players need apply. This upcoming election will be the last election in this Uranus fourth turning cycle. Planetary synopsis of both candidates. USA Uranus cycle wraps up in 2028. Trump's Algol will be felt. Civil War vibe will continue until then. Biden's second house Saturn wealth hit ends and he's due a major life change. Trump's first victory was wealth. Aspect's second election will be about power. The theme for 2024 election is Uranus and Algol. Trump's chart maxes out and wraps up in 2029. Who will be president in 2024? Whether Trump wins the election or not, Algol rules his chart. He will be president. He plays by snake rules, not law and order. Civil War vibe much? Even if it takes a war, Trump will be president. Unless the Democrats get Jesus himself to run, Trump will be president. And even Jesus might lose. Heaven help us.